Something that I believe that is a significant threat to society these days is our inability to engage in discussions, in sharing ideas and debating what we think is relevant and meaningful. And so here I believe that there are various reasons for why this is the case. And this isn't just a problem that is present in our modern societies. I believe that this is something that has been present since the moment we were able to engage in language and discuss ideas. But I think some of these natural human tendencies that impair our ability to have discussions are probably being augmented more and more due to the use of social media. And so I believe that the first thing regarding how our discussions are being impaired relates to the idea that when we start a discussion, we are not defining the issue at hand. So a lot of times I see people discussing a certain topic, but they're not defining the terms of their discussion. I see this, for example, in the debates regarding free will, and where people are defining free will in different ways, and then they're having a conversation, but the conversation isn't going anywhere because they're just not talking about the same thing. And so I believe that in order to have a proper discussion and engage in an intellectual discourse, it's essential to first define what the hell we're talking about. This is also something that I see in debates regarding consciousness, where people are also defining consciousness in different ways. And of course, these are very complex and different topics. But once again, if you can't define it, you can't really discuss it. Another thing that completely ruins our ability to have a conversation is that many people engage in a discussion with a competitive mindset instead of an open mindset, where ideas will be exchanged. And at the end, it's not a matter of actually winning the argument. It's more so the opportunity to test your ideas against someone else and see whether through this collaboration, that is a conversation, you're able to actually gain more insight over the topic that you are trying to discuss. And so this is a huge problem, I believe, because it completely removes our ability to actually listen to the other person and gain new insights. This is very observable, for example, in Twitter, now X, where people are just trying to win. There's not really an ability to see whether the other person is correct or not, and whether I can take something from the other person and use it to make my arguments better. So this collaborative idea of a discussion where the two people are actually being sculptors and trying to build something that is better is also falling through the cracks, and this is also problematic, and it's stopping our ability to have these deeper conversations. Another classic issue with conversations is that many people are debating the other person and not actually debating the ideas that the other person is trying to convey. And so this fixation on the identity or the credentials of the other person rather than what they're actually trying to discuss is extremely problematic. And so I believe that here there's something that needs to be discussed. So first of all, the credentials that the other person has are of course important. This is a useful heuristic, especially when you are completely uncertain regarding a certain topic and you need to make a decision that has some time urgency. In those situations where you cannot really engage with the content of what the other person is saying, it is crucial to evaluate or use this heuristic of trying to understand whether that person has credentials or not. Because probabilistically, if someone, let's say, for example, I want advice regarding a cancer diagnosis. Probabilistically speaking, someone who has studied cancer all their lives and has gone through extensive clinical training is most likely to give me a useful and correct information regarding a cancer diagnosis than someone who hasn't studied cancer at all. So this heuristic of looking at what the other person is and isn't is useful. But in most conversations where you actually have some time to engage with the content that the other person is telling you, and in a situation where you're actually trying to develop your knowledge over a certain topic, this heuristic can very soon become an extremely limiting aspect of conversation, because the truth is that people with credentials may make mistakes, and people without credentials may actually also give you deep and very useful insight. This is why when I'm having conversations with people that don't really know me regarding the brain and consciousness, I usually don't tell them that I'm a neuroscientist. And the reason for this is that I don't want them to simply bow down and accept the information that I'm telling them because I supposedly have this degree. And so I prefer to engage people by focusing on the content at hand rather than just fixating in this, oh, just because this person is X, then that means that person knows what they're talking about. And so, once again, this is a useful heuristic in certain conditions, but it's also important to once again redirect our attention towards the premise that the other person is telling us and analyzing it, whether it's a justified statement or not. And so this is also something that we need to be very clear with. Another problem that I see these days is that people champion this idea of being a skeptic. And so they see being a skeptic as being this extremely scientific, empowered, and virtuous person. And the problem with this is that, yes, skepticism is extremely important. Selective skepticism is a great tool, and it is the foundation of science. But a lot of people, when they claim they are skeptics, they're not actually skeptics. What they're actually doing is that they're masquerading their skepticism with dogmatism. And so we can see this in various topics where people claim that they're skeptics, that I don't believe in certain ideas, but the only reason why they do so is not because they have gone through the sequence of arguments and justifications and have seen the flaws in the arguments that have been presented, but they simply claim that they don't believe a certain thing because they're extremely dogmatic about the alternative view that sort of goes against the justifications that they have seen. And so this is also a big problem because, once again, most of these people aren't being skeptics. They're just actually using their dogmatism to reject certain ideas simply on the basis of rejecting them. And so this is another clarification that we need to be aware of and see it in ourselves. And at the end of this video, I will mention some things that I believe are useful in order to fix some of these problems. And so other than that, we humans are animals of loose associations. It is very easy for us to see patterns in everything, to see patterns even in things that don't exist. And these days where we have this accessibility to information in a very easy medium, it becomes extremely easy for us to enter sort of that Dunning-Kruger effect, where we have this exposure to all of this information, we have all of this unearned wisdom, and so we very quickly believe that we are owners of the truth and that we know a lot about everything. And this is an extremely big problem. Aside from all the various fallacies and cognitive distortions that are present in the human mind, and this is intemporal, meaning that all of these cognitive distortions have most likely been present since the beginning. So it's not just that people are now, that all of these cognitive distortions are new. It's just part of how the brain works. But having all of these loose associations and mixing all of these concepts is a big problem in terms of creating threats to the ability of generating coherent arguments and having coherent discussions. And so, for example, one thing that I tend to see, especially now in public intellectuals, is that they sort of deviate from their area of expertise and then they start talking about everything, even things that are clearly outside their wheelhouse. And so what happens in this situation, because it's inevitable, since information is becoming more and more complex, there is more total knowledge to be explored, meaning that, of course, you cannot have, like in ancient Greece or even in medieval times, where you could be a polymath, where you could have some expertise over various domains of science and philosophy. These days you have to specialize because there's just too much to know and you simply cannot master all of these skills. And so when people try to do that, when they try to say that they are experts in basically everything, even in areas that are completely and very distant from what they have been applying their trades, this becomes a problem because it very quickly becomes easy to make mistakes. And once again, it becomes very easy to enter that ego state where you believe that because you're good at something, that means that you're good at everything. And so this is also something that we need to be aware of and become more cognizant of when we are deviating from our area of expertise. And this is not to say that we can't also be wrong about what we think we are good at, but this is just a case of, once again, having that consciousness of, okay, I'm entering more of a shaky terrain because I haven't dedicated much time to this. So, of course, the strength of my convictions cannot be the same. And I should be far more open to the idea that I might be completely incorrect about what I'm stating. And now, just quickly, as a quick sidestep, I believe one of the fallacies that we see a lot these days is the naturalistic fallacy. So it's this idea that simply because we have evolved the way we did, or because our ancestors lived in a certain way, this means that certain practices are actually the ones that are healthiest and are the things that we should engage in because it's as nature intended. And so I believe that this is also a problematic question because I believe that in some cases it can be true, of course. And specifically when we're talking about diet, there are many instances where we have created products and foods that our biology hasn't totally adapted with, and this can create health problems. But in many other things, this idea that nature intended us to be a certain way is already a projection that we are applying to nature that comes from within. And so this is also a shaky terrain, and I believe that it's something that we also need to be aware of when we make these sort of naturalistic fallacies. And so to conclude, another aspect which creates some hardships in terms of having a decent conversation, an open conversation where both people will actually be able to retrieve something and not engage in a monologue, is realizing that we do not need to have an opinion regarding everything. It's perfectly okay to not have an opinion about a given issue. It's better sometimes to just admit that we don't know. We haven't formulated the necessary questions, and therefore we have no framework to actually address that question. And many people are afraid of doing this, of just saying, I don't know, because they believe that they need to have the answers. They believe that they will be perceived in a different way because they just said, I don't know. And unfortunately, this could be the case because of the incentive structure. For example, in certain institutions in the academic realm, this could be the case where saying, I don't know is not attractive, it's not sexy. But the matter of the question is that we need to be perfectly comfortable with this idea that many times we don't know, and it's okay. We don't need to have an opinion over everything. And so it's actually an act of intellectual humility. Be comfortable with this. And it's actually by entering that beginner's mindset where the world is open to the possibilities of many different variables, where we can do great work. When our minds are open, when we don't have this extremely restrained cognitive model, we're better able to perceive new variables of study, and we're able to open our minds to other viewpoints. And so overall, something that we should do that can mitigate to some extent some of these tendencies, and I will mention again that many of these tendencies are just part of our human psyche. They're normal. It's just a matter of balancing them to some extent. And I think something that we should do in these situations is trying to understand why we believe in what we believe. What are the justifications or the basis for why I believe a certain thing? And normally when we ask this question, we will realize that many of the things we believe in them because there's some emotional element to them, because we're able to identify with that belief in a way that makes us feel something. It's not really a matter of we have done the philosophical groundwork and understood and done the ontological mathematics behind it. It's just a matter that that argument touches on us in some emotional way, or even that argument is being put forward by a group of people in which we want to identify with. Because at the end of the day, we have sort of this tribal instinct of relating to certain people, relating to certain ideas, because we want to be part of that in-group. We don't want to be on the out-group. So just questioning why we believe some of the things we do, and also remembering and contemplating the complexity of our universe, I think it's also a useful tool. And so just realizing how complicated things are, how complex and uncertain the world actually is, can actually allow us to have more of an open mindset and not engage in some of the practices and issues that I mentioned in this video. So let me know what you think about the factors that I mentioned, and perhaps add some of your own. Let me know what struggles you've had when you're trying to have a discussion, an intellectual discourse with someone. And yeah, hope you found this video useful.